will now hear testimony from Mr. Brian Mears, the first mate on the Seacor Power. At this point, I'd like to take some time for you to walk us through the day of the accident, starting in the morning when you woke up, and just kind of going through to remember as many details as you can to share with us.
I went to bed around 8, 9 o'clock after I got the kids to sleep. And I got up at 2 o'clock that morning to be at the office in time for crew change. We got in a crew change vehicle from the office, and I got in the back seat, and we rode to Fouchon, Bollinger. I tried to take a nap, but I really couldn't sleep in there. We got there at Bollinger around 6 o'clock in the morning. We did a turnover with the other crew. And after that, we went inside. Dave called everyone to the galley, everybody on board. We held a safety meeting. We went over crane safety. He went over every drill, the abandoned ship drill, where to go, life jackets, where the rescue boat was for a man overboard. And he briefed on fire, if a fire happened. Then we filled out our risk assessments and JSAs for the crane work that was gonna happen. After that, everybody was dismissed. I brought my bags upstairs and seen we had an internal audit going on, and they needed a few things, so I looked over that. Then I was called to the galley. Somebody had an incident where they had tripped, and this happened at about 6:50. So we filled out an incident report, and Dave sent it off. I reviewed the internal audit information again. Noticed they needed pictures, so I went downstairs to take the pictures of what they needed. I can remember taking a picture of the standing orders for the engine room and color code in the engine room. I talked to Darren, the engineer, down there for a little bit and helped him out with something on the computer. Then I went back up, talked with Dave for a minute. There was repairs going on the starboard leg tower. The grating had got knocked off from the last voyage, and a life raft. So we were overseeing the repairs on that. After that, I went back down to relieve one of the guys. I was getting the weights of all the equipment on board, and I started recording the weights that was given to me by the crane operator. And then the other, when he came back out, I gave him back the clipboard. And me and Dave, we looked around for any damage that may have been caused by the last voyage around the leg braces and leg towers. Then after that, we picked up the walkway and waited for the company man to give us the okay that we were good to go. Once we were good, Dave said we were ready to go, and he let me jack the boat down, pull it off the dock, and get underway, which was around, I want to say 12, it was either 12:30 or 1:30, I can't recall. We got underway. We were working on channel 13 for traffic and 10 for internal boat. We had thunderstorms in the area. Before we left, Dave pulled me in his office, and we looked at the weather reports, which was showing 2 to 4 foot seas with 10 to 15 knot winds. We got out the jetties, and we were by maybe an hour out. I'm not really sure. The GMDS went off. I looked at it. It said cannot print. My thought was probably the paper's a little low, even though it had paper in it. So we had traffic and platforms and rain squalls, so I was going to attend to it later. At around 3 o'clock, 2:40, Dave went downstairs to go send his report in, his evening report. When Dave got back up, a rain squall came from behind, which we had 79 miles an hour winds. And we discussed maybe it'll lay down the seas. Shortly after that rain squall, we had a whiteout. Maybe 5-10 minutes is what it seemed like. So I suggested with traffic and platforms in the area that we soft tag the boat. And he said, okay. So I engaged the PTOs and took out the clutch on the inboards. And started jacking and then maneuvering to bow into the wind to slow my momentum. At which point I noticed we had a starboard list. I told Dave we have a small starboard list. The boat will list some while jacking and turning, so it wasn't a big deal. We got a call on the Guytronics from the galley about water coming in the watertight door. I told him, okay, dog it tighter. We are jacking now. When I looked back up at the level, we were listing more, and I told Dave, I think we're going over. Dave got at the helm and tried to steer into it. I was going to port, he went to starboard. We continued jacking. I realized we were not gonna be able to correct it, so I hit the tilt alarm, which sends the alarm through the vessel. This all happened within a minute or two, and during that time, got another call from the galley about the galley door. After I hit the tilt alarm, I noticed the door. So I grabbed the door and we were going over. And that's when I watched Dave. That's when I watched Dave fall. Never seen him again. As we were going over, I noticed the equipment slid off the deck. So as I was hanging, I dropped down on the side of the cockpit behind the radar and hollered for anybody if anybody needed any help. I didn't get no response. The only thing I could think of was to push the distress button on the GMDSS. So I stepped across to the back On the GMDSS, I pushed the button until it beeped, and I held it a little longer, just to make sure. There was a work vest sitting there from one of the contractors, or inflatable life jacket. I picked it up, put it on, and I thought, how am I gonna get out of here? I climbed back up to the door and was able to push it open. I climbed out and was sitting on the side of the wheelhouse. I remembered the SART was right there by the door. So I grabbed the SART off the wall on the side of the weather door on the wheelhouse. And I kept waiting to see if Dave would come up. And I hollered for anybody outside. Nobody answered. A life jacket washed up. So I put the life jacket on because the first one didn't inflate when I pulled it. I put the horse collar type life jacket on, and then I held on and I got washed off. I got back on the side of the wheelhouse. I got washed off again. The third time I got washed off, there was a life ring. I grabbed it. I seen a life raft, so I was swimming to it. They had a big box next to it, toolbox. Before I could get to it, it broke free. When I looked back, there was someone standing on the superstructure. I don't know who it was. I hollered, but they never heard me. And while in the water, it was rough, and the seas built worse and worse. An absorbent pad washed up, a roll of absorbent pads washed up. I grabbed them, but it started tangling in my legs, so I let it go. I couldn't hardly tear it. Finally got it tore off. Then I had rope tangled in my legs. So I had a pocket knife in my pocket, so I cut the rope free. After that, I seen a few boats. I had that SART, and I was like, they're gonna come. I could see them. I could see the whole boat. But they never did. I seen 4 boats, and then I seen the 5th one. I thought they were running weather patterns. And there was a little satellite platform behind them. So my plan was to get on that satellite platform if possible. So I started kicking to line myself up the way I was drifting. The boat was kind of quartering away from me when I first seen it. But every time I'd go up on top of the waves, I would wave. Finally, they turned to me. I could see them on the boat, but they still hadn't acknowledged that they seen me, so I kept waving. Finally, they waved back, and that's when I knew that they had seen me. And that's when I started getting a little cold. They maneuvered the boat, threw me a life ring, and pulled me on board. They got me in the shower to warm me up and got me some dry clothes. And they put some Band-Aids on my hand and let me call the office and my wife. And they asked if I wanted to go in. I said, no, keep looking, I'm okay. And we stayed out all night looking and stayed by the vessel until I got back in the dock about 10 o'clock the next morning.
Thank you very much. That's a lot of detail. That's very helpful to us. Good job. We have some follow-up questions. First topic going to focus on is really kind of the immediate things before and after the accident and the weather that was there on scene that night. On your transit out, can you describe for us the ship motions? Was the ship rolling at all? Was it heaving? Was it yawing? How was it acting?
That vessel with that one is so wide, it doesn't really roll too much, depending on the seas. And the way they were hitting us, it wasn't bad. We had about 2 to 4 foot seas, and it was coming off our starboard bow.
So they were coming off the bow. Was it heaving at all?
Not really. We weren't even getting water on the deck, so it wasn't. They said it's so wide, it was just basically on top of them.
Do you know if there was any kind of current offshore that
I
afternoon?
noticed when we were in the water, when I was in the water, they had a bit of current. But while underway, I didn't notice.
Okay. And on your transit out, what direction was the wind coming from? I think you said it was 10 or 15 on the way out?
We were going southeast. It was a south-southeast.
And so the winds were coming
From the south-southeast at first, yes.
from your bow, basically?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And about what time was it when that first rain squall came through that you described?
About 3:30-ish, maybe a little later, may have been closer to 4.
And when the winds first started picking up, did you look at the wind gauge at all?
Yes, we seen 79 miles an hour. That's when the first squall hit.
So it jumped up from where it was right up
Yes.
to 70?
79, yes,
How,
ma'am.
how quickly did it jump?
Pretty quick. It went from 15 to 20 to 79. And then it slowed back down to around 40. And that's when we had discussed that maybe it'll lay the seas down for us because it came off our stern.
So the wind was coming from your bow, and then it started coming from the stern?
Stern, yes, ma'am.
And when it started coming from the stern, what would you say the time was when it jumped from 15 to 70?
It was around 4 o'clock. I'm
And
not sure exactly what time.
how much time did it take for that jump to happen?
Couple minutes.
And your anemometer is in miles per hour or knots?
It was in miles per hour.
Okay, and then you said it slowed to about 40?
Yes, ma'am. It was gusting up to about 40 and it was blowing around 30, but it sustained for 40 for a little bit and then went back down to 30, and just the last I looked at it, it was about 32.
And about how long did it stay at that level?
Well, the next rain squall came, it was a whiteout, and that's when we decided to soft tag. And I didn't look at it again, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, about how much time between when it slowed back down to 40 or 30 and then when the next whiteout hit?
About 5-10 minutes.
Was there rain with the first
A
squall?
little bit, but not like the second one.
Okay. Can you describe the second one a little bit?
I didn't notice the wind, but I did notice the rain. I couldn't hardly see past the bow of the vessel. I could no longer see the platforms in the distance, which were a couple miles away.
So before that hit, what would you say your range of visibility was?
About 5 to 6 miles.
And then you said you couldn't see past the bow of the vessel. Could you see the bow of the
I could see the
vessel?
bow, but maybe just a little past it. It just seemed like I couldn't see much past it.
You have a lot of years at sea. Have you ever seen a storm like this before?
No, ma'am.